There's an academic immersion that I run for Coffee Beans Experiences. It's loosely titled Quantum Economics. It's an exploration in economic development in Cape Town. And the starting point is that the future of the economy, or the economy of the future, the city of the future, is being shaped in some of the most marginalized communities that exist here. So that the real innovation, and it turns out the real savings, is not in the places that most people really expect it to be. And when I do these trips, because we're kind of looking at economic mythology and economic illusions, one of the things that I try to do at the beginning of the program, the audience for this, by the way, is largely executive, sort of early career, maybe some mid-career MBA students, largely from the United States of America. So these are people who are in their 30s or 40s, and they're either upskilling themselves or they're looking to make a transition, and this is the tool for it. So these are generally, interestingly, these university groups, the students are mostly not American, but they're studying in America. So they're international students at an American university on a study abroad program. Okay, so they're well traveled. They're all articulate. They're all smart. So it's really interesting to sort of have an opportunity to tap into that sort of universe that is. These are going to become CEOs of big companies at some point. They're unlikely. This is what I've learned with MBA programs. MBA, and please challenge me, but from what I've observed, MBA students are not entrepreneurs. They don't start their own companies. They will work for a company and they'll become seniors in the C-suite. They're unlikely to start their own businesses, which is interesting. It's a whole other conversation. Anyway, one of the things I like to do in these programs at the start as a way of gaining some momentum around a program that is busting myths in South Africa is to bust some myths that are common, that are not specific to our context here. So when we're leaving, we use because this is like it's a class out of the classroom, if you like. So it's a class that's conducted across a big swathe of the city of Cape Town. So we leave from the historic city to our first destination, which is typically in Langa. So it's about 12 and a half kilometers away, 12, 13 kilometers away from most parts of the city. And so I'll start off by asking them a couple of questions, and I wanted to share those questions with you because I think there's many other such questions, and I'd love to hear some more. So the first one is, there's the story or this idea that if you put a frog into a pot of boiling water, the frog will absolutely realize it's boiling and will then attempt to escape. But if you put a frog in a pot of cold water and turn up the heat, by the time the frog realizes it's boiling water and dangerous, it's too late for it to jump out, right? I think everybody's heard this. And it turns out that it is absolutely untrue. It's untrue, and I'm gonna give you the lowdown on it. But it's interesting. In a bus of 30 people going on this journey, almost every single one of them will raise their hands and say they believe this to be true. Okay, then we'll ask about the bats. I grew up, and up until recently understood that bats were blind. It turns out bats are absolutely not blind. They do have echolocation abilities, but that's not the only way that they image the world around them. They are, these are electric vehicles, man. They've got LiDAR, they've got radar, and it also turns out that they can see. Almost 30 hands, and the only ones who are not putting up their hands is people who are just there sending an email or something, right? But pretty much everybody's attentive. And everybody will say, I believe bats to be blind. And they're not blind, right? So that's two myths already, that an entire group of people, representative of what percentage, who knows, I don't know. But it's enough, right? And then the other one that I use, I just typically have three, is who understands that if you are going to swim, you should not eat immediately before you go and swim, that you should leave like at least half an hour for your digestion, otherwise you're going to get stomach cramps. This is medically false, it's untrue. And all 30 people in the bus will put up their hands, right? So of course this is fascinating, because all of these myths I, at some point, held to. I understood them to be true. And then suddenly you discover unequivocal evidence that says that this is, it's absolutely not true. So how much of how we see the world around us, how much of the reality that we are moving through, that we perceive to be reality, is in fact false? And these are the small, everyday things. This is the conditioning. Some of this stuff, not so much bats are blind and the story of the frog, but boys don't cry. Reading in low light will damage your eyes. Boys should be emotionally, non-expressive. These are the things, certainly like in the environment that I grew up with, and I know most people across demographics. These are quite consistent across demographics. So it's really useful at the start of that to get people open to the possibilities of what are laying ahead in the day. It's a really interesting, useful tool. And then we proceed into those economic fallacies, mythologies within our country, and then we play them out quite specifically in different parts of the city. Langa, usually Langa, Mitchell's Plain, across that corridor, all the way down to the R310 that runs along the coastline, Khayelitsha as a beachfront, Mitchell's Plain as beachfront, all the way through. It's a really interesting corridor, Muizenberg to Stellenbosch. It's an incredibly powerful piece of connective tissue in the city of Cape Town that's just not given attention. It's not, at least at this point. I think there's a framework out there that I haven't studied yet, but looks to be a process that's being undertaken with some really interesting thoughts as to what that corridor could become for the multitudes of communities that are located along it. You keep on wanting to think about a train that goes from Muizenberg to Mitchell's Plain, Khayelitsha, Lyndoch, Stellenbosch, beyond, whatever's the other side, all the way through to join up the line actually and get to. But in fact, it would join the train line at Lyndoch. It could absolutely join the train, that line, the Cape Flats line, and then it goes through, I think, to Wellington. And then also you've got Strand towards Gordons Bay, which is like also a pocket of Cape Town that is absolutely fascinating. You watch what's going on there at the moment, that whole Strand area. It's emerging and developing, but in a very different way to how that Atlantic seaboard coastline developed. Anyway, so these mythologies, like when you're trying to engage more deeply with what we see in front of us all the time, and to try and see through a lot of the illusions that I create, that everybody creates around it, just trying to navigate through connective tissue, through people, through perspective in so many different places, that gives you a very different insight and understanding to how you might already have decided things are. So you open them up on the bus with like, oh, okay, so what might we discover today that we believed to be true is in fact untrue? And what a wonderful way to connect, like for me, through them, connecting to these really incredible people across the city that we happen to work with, is very pleasurable. Anyway, so myths. I would love to hear from other people about, you know what the other one is? Sorry, quickly. I know this is already a video. This idea that we only use 10% of our brain power. I mean, I don't know where this comes from, but I used to hear it all the time. These things absolutely become operating system. It becomes an architecture. Yeah, the architectural myths that form how we see the world, how we're experiencing the world. You gather all of these things together and you start to strip them away. How does that change the way that I move through the world? Like as you add new data sets that give you deeper insight, what's the, Okay, thank you.